It was 7:47 in the morning when Ingrid Leclerc's phone lit up on the bathroom counter. She was in the middle of braiding Sophie's hair for school. Her 11-year-old sat perfectly still on the edge of the bathtub, clutching a piece of toast she hadn't finished, when the notification sound broke the quiet. Ingrid didn't check it. She finished the braid, kissed the top of her daughter's head, and told her to grab her backpack. The message was from Karen, Damien's younger sister. They weren't especially close, but they were cordial. The kind of in-law relationship that worked smoothly at Christmas and didn't ask for much in between. "Call me when Sophie's at school. It's important." Ingrid read it twice. Set the phone face down on the vanity. Walked downstairs, packed Sophie's lunch. A cheese sandwich, apple slices, the small bag of pretzels her daughter liked, and drove her to school 6 minutes away without once letting the feeling in her stomach rise above her chest. She kissed Sophie goodbye at the curb. Sophie waved without looking back, already talking to her best friend by the time she reached the gate. That small ordinary thing, her daughter unbothered, moving forward, was what steadied Ingrid as she pulled back onto the road. She called Karen from the parking lot of a Tim Hortons 2 blocks away. She didn't go inside. She sat in the car with the engine running and the heater on, watching a city pigeon work at a muffin wrapper on the asphalt. Karen answered on the second ring. She didn't waste time. "Damien's been seeing someone," she said. "It's been going on for a while. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I wasn't sure. Now I am." Ingrid said nothing. "Her name is Amber Croft," Karen continued, her voice lower now, careful. "She does lifestyle content. She posted something last night from what I'm pretty sure was his hotel in Vancouver. And Ingrid," she stopped, exhaled. "She's wearing your bracelet, your mother's bracelet, the one with the sapphires." The pigeon found something worth keeping and flew off. "Send me the screenshot," Ingrid said. Karen sent it before they'd hung up. Ingrid opened the image and looked at it for a long time. Amber Croft, 27 years old by the looks of her, lying across a hotel duvet in the late morning light, her arms stretched toward the camera. Around her wrist, delicate gold, small sapphires set in a row, the bracelet Ingrid had given Damien 3 weeks ago to drop at the jeweler's on King Street because the clasp had been stiff and she was worried about losing it. He'd come home that evening and said the jeweler needed another week. She'd forgotten to ask about it after that. The caption read, "When he spoils you right." Ingrid put the phone in her bag. She sat with her hands in her lap. The heater was still running. Outside, a woman in a down coat walked past, pushing a stroller, head down against the February wind. She didn't cry. Not yet. She had a 9 o'clock client meeting at the firm. She had Sophie's dentist appointment on Thursday. She had 14 years of marriage to a man who had apparently handed her dead mother's bracelet to someone else as though it were a hotel amenity. She pressed her fingertips to the steering wheel, breathed in through her nose, and let the feeling settle somewhere beneath her ribs where it couldn't control anything. Her mother's voice came to her the way it sometimes did. "You're a Leclerc. Think first. Feel later." Ingrid put the car in drive. She was one of the founding partners at Leclerc & Associates, a firm she'd built from a junior position at 29 to the name on the door by 36. Bay Street knew her for her measured approach, her precision, the way she never walked into a room she hadn't already mapped. She did not act on incomplete information. She gathered. By the time she reached her office, she had already made 2 decisions. The first, she would not tell Damien she knew. The second, she would not make a single move until she understood the full shape of what she was dealing with. Her assistant Ruth met her in the hallway with a coffee and a summary of the morning's calendar. Ingrid thanked her, walked into her office, and closed the door. She spent the next 2 hours on Amber Croft's public Instagram, not scrolling aimlessly, but reading methodically, the way she read depositions. Amber had 83,000 followers. She posted about travel, skincare, restaurant recommendations. Her aesthetic was warm-toned, aspirational. She never named anyone. But the patterns were there if you looked. There were 14 posts over the past 8 months that didn't add up if Damien had been where he said he was. A cocktail in a hotel bar in Calgary the same weekend he'd been covering the playoffs. A rooftop in Montreal during what he'd told Ingrid was a broadcasters' conference. And 3 weeks ago, a close-up shot of a hotel room service cart. Good china, a single rose, 2 cups of espresso, captioned simply, "Mornings that matter." 2 cups. Ingrid saved everything to a private folder on her phone. She wrote nothing down at the office. She told no one. Damien came home from Vancouver on a Sunday afternoon, rolling his luggage through the back door the way he always did, calling out for Sophie before he'd even taken off his coat. Sophie ran downstairs and threw herself at him, and Damien held her and said he'd missed her and brought her a small stuffed orca from a gift shop. Ingrid watched from the hallway and said, "Welcome home," and asked if he was hungry. They had dinner together, the 3 of them. Damien talked about the coverage, the arena, the flight delay. Sophie talked about her science project. Ingrid asked the right questions and passed the bread and cleared the plates, and felt nothing she allowed herself to show. After Sophie was in bed, Damien sat beside her on the couch and put his arm around her and turned on a documentary neither of them was really watching. Ingrid noticed he'd had the clasp on his watch replaced, the same watch she'd asked him to drop at the jeweler on King Street 3 weeks ago, the same trip he'd apparently never made. She said, "Did you ever get my bracelet back from the shop?" He didn't hesitate. "Ah, they said it needs a special part. Probably another 2 weeks." "Okay," she said, "no rush." She waited until he was asleep before she let herself feel anything. She stood at the kitchen window for 11 minutes, watching the backyard, the snow under the neighbor's security light. Then she washed her face, checked on Sophie, and went to bed. In the morning she called George Lau, her most trusted associate at the firm. She told him she needed a discreet recommendation for a family law specialist, not from their usual referral list. Someone thorough. George gave her 2 names without asking why. 3 weeks later, the Trillium Children's Foundation announced their annual spring gala and broadcast fundraiser. It was one of the largest charity events in the city. A live telethon aired across a major Canadian network, black tie, attended by the kind of people whose names were already on hospital wings. Ingrid's firm was a platinum-level sponsor, had been for 4 years. The foundation's executive director called personally to tell her she would be acknowledged on air during the live broadcast, a gesture of thanks for the legal work Leclerc and Associates had done on their behalf the previous year at no charge. Ingrid said she would be happy to attend. She would come alone. Damien had been invited too, not as her husband, but as a network anchor. His station was co-producing the broadcast. She hadn't mentioned the gala to him. He hadn't mentioned it to her. They were still sleeping in the same bed, still sharing coffee in the morning, still attending Sophie's school concert on a Thursday in March, sitting next to each other in gymnasium chairs, applauding at the right moments. The family law specialist Ingrid had retained, a woman named Adele Grange who had been practicing for 22 years, had quietly begun a preliminary review of their joint assets. Ingrid had given her access to everything she needed. The process was invisible. Damien noticed nothing. She retrieved the bracelet herself one weekend while Damien was out with Sophie at the hockey rink. The clasp had been serviced and repaired. Amber, apparently, had taken care of what Ingrid's husband had not. The bracelet arrived by courier with no note. Ingrid understood that Amber must have felt some private shame about the whole thing, or perhaps just the pragmatism of someone removing evidence she'd worn publicly. Either way, the bracelet was back in Ingrid's possession. She fastened it around her wrist for the first time in 4 months, adjusted the clasp, and let herself feel the small, cool weight of it. Her mother had worn it every day for 31 years. The night of the gala was clear and cold, the kind of March night in Toronto, where your breath is visible and the stars look closer than usual. Ingrid wore a midnight green dress she'd bought 2 weeks earlier, not because she was making a statement, but because she'd seen it in a window on Bloor Street, and it made her feel like herself again. She wore small gold earrings, low heels, and the bracelet. She arrived alone, spoke briefly to 2 colleagues from a partner firm, and was directed to the sponsors' table near the front. The ballroom was already filling. Camera crews setting up along the perimeter, monitors carrying the live feed, the network's logo backlit on the stage. She saw Damien 20 minutes later. He was across the room, in conversation with a producer, still in his anchor's blazer, an earpiece curled at his collar. He hadn't seen her yet. She had known he would be here, had rehearsed this exact moment a dozen times in the car, in the shower, lying awake in the 4 a.m. dark. She nodded to him from across the room when he finally looked up and found her. He nodded back. He crossed toward her slowly, the careful, neutral expression of a man calibrating the air between them. "Didn't know you were coming," he said. "I RSP'd in January," she said pleasantly. He looked as though he wanted to say something else and didn't. The foundation's executive director appeared at Ingrid's elbow and swept her into a conversation about the legal cases, and Damien drifted back toward the production team. The broadcast began at 8. The room went quiet. The cameras went live. Damien co-hosted from the stage, smooth and polished, his voice warm in the way it always was on air. Ingrid watched him from her table and thought, not for the first time, that he was very good at performing ease. At 9:20, the executive director took the microphone and began the acknowledgement segment. She thanked the corporate sponsors, the volunteer committee, the lead donors, and then she said, one individual, whose contribution this year went far beyond a check, Ingrid Leclaire of Leclaire & Associates, who gave this foundation hundreds of hours of pro bono legal work to help secure the land transfer for our new West End wing. Ingrid, would you stand? Ingrid stood. The room applauded. She inclined her head, a small gracious smile, her left hand resting lightly on the back of her chair, the bracelet catching the stage light. On the monitors around the room, the ones carrying the live network feed, the camera found her face for 3 seconds, then panned to capture the room's response. Thousands of people watching across the country saw her stand, saw the bracelet, saw her composure. What Ingrid had known, and Damien did not, was that the network's social media team always captured these acknowledgement moments and posted them in real time to the broadcast live Instagram. By 9:24, a photo of Ingrid standing at her table, elegant, composed, the bracelet clearly visible at her wrist, had been posted to an account with over 400,000 followers. Amber Croft followed that account. Ingrid had confirmed this quietly 3 days earlier. She did not look across the room to find Damien's face. She sat back down, smoothed her napkin across her lap, and accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server. By the time the broadcast wrapped at 11, Amber Croft had deleted 31 posts from her Instagram. Ingrid only found out the next morning when Karen sent a message. "She's scrubbing everything. I don't think she knew who you were." Ingrid replied, "She does now." At the office that morning, Ruth brought coffee and set it on the corner of the desk without comment. George Lau knocked on the open door frame mid-morning and asked, simply, "Everything all right?" "Better than it's been in months," Ingrid said. "Thank you for asking." She had one more thing to do. A journalist she respected, a woman named Andrea Kolkhoun, who wrote for a national magazine and had a reputation for accuracy and restraint, had been wanting to profile her for 2 years. Ingrid had always declined, not wanting the attention. She called Andrea that afternoon and told her she was ready. "What changed?" Andrea asked. "I did," Ingrid said. The interview ran 6 weeks later. It was not about Damien. It was not about the bracelet or the gala or any of it. It was about the firm, about the foundation work, about what it meant to build something that outlasted the life you thought you were building it for. Andrea was careful and Ingrid was precise, and there was one paragraph near the end that people quoted more than any other. "I was asked recently what I would do differently. The honest answer is, nothing. Not because I didn't make mistakes, I made plenty, but because every decision I made in the difficult months taught me exactly what I was made of. You find out who you are, not in the good years, but in the ones that try to take everything from you, and I found out I was more than I'd been using." It ran with a photograph, Ingrid at her office window, the city behind her, one hand raised to the glass, the bracelet visible at her wrist. Damien moved into a furnished apartment in Leslieville in April, 6 weeks after the gala. He hadn't asked Ingrid to leave. He had known, somewhere in the week following the broadcast, that something had shifted irrevocably. When she finally came to him, in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning while Sophie was upstairs getting ready for school, she had been quiet and clear. "I know everything," she said. "I've known for a while. I've been careful because of Sophie and because I needed to be ready. I'm ready now. Adele Grange will be in touch with your lawyer this week. He tried 3 things in succession: deny it, explain it, apologize for it. Ingrid let him finish all 3. I know, she said again to each. It doesn't change what happens next. Sophie was the hardest thing. Not the finances, which Adele navigated with a precision that made even Damien's lawyer visibly uncomfortable. Not the house, Ingrid kept it as she always would have. Not the evenings or the mornings or the quiet that came with being alone in a home she'd shared for 9 years. Those things were hard, but they were her own hardness to manage, and she managed it. Sophie was different. Sophie was 11 and understood more than most adults remembered children understood, and she cried in the car on the way home from school the afternoon. Ingrid sat her down and told her gently that Mom and Dad were going to live separately. Did you know for a long time? Sophie asked. A little while, Ingrid said honestly. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Ingrid looked at her daughter's face. Because I needed to be sure I had everything figured out first, so that when I told you, I could also tell you it was going to be okay. And it is going to be okay. Sophie had cried herself out, then asked if she could still see her dad's games on TV. Yes. Whether she could still go to Karen's for March break. Yes. Whether Ingrid would still make the same chicken soup she always made on Sundays. Yes, always. You seem less sad than I thought you'd be, Sophie said finally, squinting at her with the particular suspicion of an 11-year-old who has been paying attention. I am sad, Ingrid said. I'm very sad about some parts of it, but I'm not broken. Do you understand the difference? Sophie thought about it. Yeah, she said, I think so. By summer, Leclerc and Associates had taken on 2 new associates and expanded into a second floor of the building. The foundation work had led to 3 new nonprofit clients who'd heard about the firm through the magazine profile. Ruth had finally gotten the raise Ingrid had been meaning to give her for a year. George Lau had been promoted to senior partner. Amber Croft went quiet on social media for 3 months, then returned with a different tone. Less aspirational, more subdued. She posted about starting over, about being honest with herself. She did not post about hotel rooms or bracelets, or men who had 2 cups of espresso waiting. Some of her followers appreciated the shift. Ingrid had long since stopped looking. Damien called in June to ask if Ingrid would consider appearing on a network panel about legal advocacy, a segment being produced around the foundation's new wing. He asked with the careful neutrality of a man who had been humbled by consequence. I'll consider it, she said. She took a week, spoke with Ruth, thought about whether it served anything she was building. Then she called the producer directly, not Damien, and agreed to the segment on her own terms. She showed up on camera, composed and clear in a gray blazer, the bracelet at her wrist. The segment aired on a Tuesday morning. Sophie watched it on Ingrid's laptop before school, eating her cereal and said, "You look like yourself." Ingrid poured her own coffee and looked at her daughter over the rim of the mug. "Yes," she said, "that's exactly what I was going for." On a Friday evening in late August, Ingrid sat on the back porch of the house she had not given up, with a glass of wine and the sound of Sophie's music drifting down from the second floor. The neighborhood was loud with the slow fade of summer. Someone's backyard party 2 doors down, the last light going pink over the rooftops. The bracelet was on her wrist. It was always on her wrist now. She had written herself a letter in the weeks after the gala, something she'd never done before. She'd sealed it and put it in the back of her desk drawer with the label, "For when I forget." She hadn't opened it since. She didn't think she needed to. What she understood now was this. There was a version of herself she had been maintaining for other people for a very long time, careful, accommodating, always the one who smoothed the room and packed the lunches and asked the right questions at dinner and never made anyone uncomfortable with the full weight of who she actually was. That version had been useful. It had also been an enormous amount of work. She wasn't angry about it anymore. Anger was a fast burn. What she felt now was steadier, quieter, more permanent, the satisfaction of a foundation properly laid. The music upstairs changed, something with a slower beat. Sophie had her mother's taste in things she had no idea she'd inherited. Ingrid set down her glass, leaned back in her chair, and let the evening do what evenings are supposed to do. She was not the woman who had been betrayed. She was not the punchline or the scandal, or someone else's cautionary tale. She was the one who had decided what kind of life came next, and then, quietly and without asking anyone's permission, had gone and built it.